On episode 80 of Chit Chat, it's about time we had a serious talk about Kickstarter. Everyone under the sun is taking to the platform, and some games make perfect sense, while others can tend to get lost in all.
Hey everybody, welcome back.
Welcome back, everyone. It seems like it's been a while. This is episode 80.
Oh.
That's a good round number of Chit Chat. And today we're going to talk about, well, we just had a big conversation. I wasn't sure we were going to talk about this, but we are going to talk about sort of crowdfunding in general and how significant it has got. We've had this topic before, but I think now it's truer than ever before that there's a lot of Kickstarters going on. There's a lot of things going on in crowdfunding in general, especially in the board game space. Some of it is definitely built for it. And then I think more and more companies are getting in there that have more traditional retail products that are also trying to sort of like taste a little bit of that crowdfunding money if they can before they go to retail. But before we talk about any of that exciting, fun stuff, we've got a winner from...
All right, so last time we gave away the game Katara from Yellow Games. That's going to Aaron Clark, Aaron. Email us at manversmeeple@gmail.com to claim your prize. This week we're giving away a copy of Meeple Land. Kira's got it. You can see it right there. From Blue Orange Games. All right, so all you have to do is make a comment right now or in a week from now for our next chit chat.
Or even a week in like 4 days from now, perhaps.
That's true.
Just as long as it's before our next chit chat. You could make it after our next chit chat, but your chances of winning go down severely.
To zero, almost.
To zero. Almost zero.
Almost. So we're going to talk about, think of Kickstarter when you think of crowdfunding, but of course there's a lot of other platforms. And I bring this up for a couple reasons. One, there's a lot of these platforms that are incredibly viable. But two, one of our own here kind of does work and works for one of them, Ryan.
Yeah, I guess that's kind of a disclaimer that I would say going into any of these conversations about crowdfunding. I do work, my day job is for GameFound, which is a relatively new crowdfunding platform. GameFound's been working as a pledge manager for a couple years now, but we literally just launched crowdfunding a couple months ago, and we've only had 2 projects so far. So anything I say about crowdfunding, of course, like doesn't reflect GameFound, but also it does come from that lens of like, I work in this industry. I talk about crowdfunding stuff all day long. So I have a little bit of a unique perspective, just from seeing it from that other side of the camera, you know?
So long story short, what that means is when we really talk about the nitty-gritty, dirty side of crowdfunding, Ryan's just going to sit there and become quiet, or his screen's just going to go dark
Right.
all of a sudden.
I don't want to get censored.
Well, and also Kira does a lot of work with a lot of different Kickstarters. So keep that in mind as well. And, Jeremy and I, we play board games. And we run a Kickstarter every once in a while. But we know some things, and we're, as a lot of you are, you're constantly looking out there at the next campaign. So we're going to talk about the ups and the downs and some of what's going on and whether or not, people think it's there's too much going on out there. Obviously, there's enough to support other platforms like GameFound and others.
I was going to kind of lead with that a little bit, actually, since we already just talked about that. I think David is right. I mean, when Kickstarter just first started, I mean, there was a few companies that used it, and none of them were huge until companies like Simon got on board, and then we've had all kinds of people using Kickstarter across the board. Obviously, there are a lot of crowdfunding projects, and there are a lot of people that need crowdfunding or want to use crowdfunding. If there wasn't, then platforms like Indiegogo and GameFound would not exist. There's so much room in the market for growth right now because the number of projects is escalating like at an unprecedented rate. I mean, it feels like every month, I think, David, you said every month it feels like there's double the amount of projects there were before. And certainly some months feel that more than others.
Yeah, well, even less than months, weeks. There's like some weeks, like this past week had a massive, like just, and it's all on Tuesday, right? This is another thing I wanted to talk about. We see all of these things happen, and they happen in such a concentrated way because oftentimes people are launching on a specific day. It happens to feel like it's Tuesday. I didn't watch the video, but another content creator, Jeremy, you're going to have to remind me his name. Bowler? From up north. From up
Bauer's Game
Bauer put a video out basically saying, kind of asking the question, why is everyone launch on Tuesday? And we might have some, I don't know, Kira, if that's something you can speak to. Maybe you have an opinion, maybe you don't. I'll start and talk about the idea of spreading things out so it doesn't feel so potentially like bloated on any given day. And that's, Jeremy, you'll remember this too. Back in the day in the video game industry, everyone, this is not on a daily basis, but everyone released games in the fall during the holiday season. And if you missed that, it was disastrous. And then one March 3rd, I think it was a Resident Evil title way back in the day had slipped out of the holiday season and it launched on March, and it was huge. And then all of a sudden, everyone treated the early, February, March timeframe also for the video game industry as something that was completely viable. And now it's kind of spread out. A lot of things do release still in the holiday timeframe, but I don't think it's nearly as dependent on that. And people started to learn, like, oh, it's not really as much about capitalizing on that as much as it is, just releasing a good quality product whenever you have it to release. I think that timing comes more into play for people who maybe can't rely as much on their product and more want to sort of ride the shirt tails of other products that are happening at the same time and grab the attention of all the people that happen to be looking. What does everyone think?
Yeah, I want to know from Kira, like, you run so many Kickstarters. What is the reasoning behind the Monday, Tuesday release? Like,
nobody
exactly
does Monday. I mean, some people do, but
no, they absolutely do Monday. I just
and
launched one on Monday.
Some people do Wednesday, but traditionally Tuesdays always had the better results. So that a long time ago, that was what was happening. Some people tried to launch on other days and the project maybe didn't do as well as they expected, maybe because it was the day, maybe because it was the project, but it just became kind of a way of going, okay, well, we always know Kickstarter is going to be on Tuesday now. The bulk of Kickstarter will happen on Tuesday. And one of the things that benefits those Kickstarters, oddly enough, is that there's suddenly a bunch more traffic on Kickstarter and people are looking at all their options, right? Like, ooh, what else launched today? Because it's recommending that stuff to them once they get on. And so it just kind of brings a big launch day that is a Tuesday, like this past week, brings more attention to some games. And of course, it drowns out others. That just is part of how it ends up. What's hot this week? Who's getting excited about what? But that is pretty much why. And I don't think it's completely founded anymore, but it's just become the thing, right? And to David's point about seasonality, right? I think I even said this to you the other day, Jeremy, but like Kickstarter season. I know starting the first Tuesday after New Year's Day, we're going to start seeing Kickstarters ramp up and do that all the way through Q1. And then it slows down. It doesn't go away. It slows down for the Q2 heading to the end of the school year into summer season. We'll see how that changes this year. And then it didn't seem to affect it so much last year, but it was still early in COVID. So I think people were still testing the waters. But and then it kind of picks back up again in Q3 because of like Gen Con and Essen and people trying to time things with that. So you don't see a ton in Q4, but it's just, and all of us that work on Kickstarters and work, probably Ryan too, because when you work in the crowdfunding space, you're just like, it's really, really busy right now. Like I finished a campaign and I'm working on a couple now, and other people on my team have them as well. So there's a lot of overlapping stuff happening right now. It just is a very busy time, but it's pretty much like this every year. So.
Yeah, I think without conventions, I mean, nothing's been announced this year, right? No in-person conventions. I know Gen Con's gone online with their spring thing, and
Geekway.
I guess maybe in September.
I guess what I'm saying is, I'm not sure it really matters this year if they schedule in the early, mid, or late. If there's no conventions to go to, like, someone's got to buy games, right?
I think
you can't buy them at a con.
Genway mentioned that in the comments, and I think that's absolutely true. And I think that there are a lot of games that would have debuted at a convention and sold on the convention floor, and they would use, like Renegade used to, have a big Gen Con release and they would use that to drive up marketing. Whatever those games would have been this year, I think they're going to go to Kickstarter instead. Because if you can't hype something up in person at a con, well, you can still hype it up on, Kickstarter or GameFound or even Indiegogo the same way, right? And I think without being able to see a game and build that kind of anticipation, really crowdfunding is the only option for people, unless they're going to take a huge risk and drop something right in retail, which we just saw what today with Stardew Valley. Like that still is happening. People are just going straight to retail with games, but it's risky. And a lot of companies right now aren't as healthy as they were at this time last year. And I don't know that many companies can afford a risk right now. So I think crowdfunding is looking very appealing across the entire industry.
Well, and to your point, Ryan,
Agree.
I think you have to consider the fact that there's a print run minimum in order for a game to be worth making, right? Worth printing and getting out into the public. So if you aren't confident in what that print run is going to be, and you say want to take a lower print run, well, your margins just dropped significantly, and now you're like, well, is it worth it? So what the crowdfunding and pre-order systems are doing, because you see CrowdOx doing like a pre-order non-Kickstarter things now. Kickstarter, some people are basically using it as a pre-order. People are doing their own pre-orders. Crowdfunding over on GameFound has started in both ways, I believe. So anyway, all of those things to say that you will get an idea of what you need to print by doing that, and you'll have a solid number you can feel confident about, and then you have extra for retail, right? But this way you know what you need to print. You're closer to that information versus taking, like Brian said, just a hit in the dark, hoping it's going to be a game that people are excited about.
And I think, I mean, as someone who buys games and backs games, I think that's completely fine. There's always been that sort of long-standing argument, when people see either big companies, established companies that have traditionally taken their games to retail in the past, playing in the Kickstarter space or the crowdfunding space, and kind of being annoyed, like, well, they don't need to do that. But, I mean, I think from my perspective, everyone needs to remember these companies, most of them are not rolling in cash.
Right.
So it's not like since they're corporations doesn't mean they just have a ton of money. So this is a viable new platform for anyone to play in. I mean, those are the rules. Anyone can play there. You don't need to be some little, one person outfit to go on Kickstarter. You can do this, and it does allow people to make better business decisions, and hopefully thereby letting these companies operate better, longer, not go away necessarily, which is something we should all,
for sure,
be happy about, I think.
I agree with all that. I still think Kickstarter, though, is very tricky. Like, I don't know, like, David, you would probably agree with this assessment. Like 4 years ago, you and I could look at a game and be like, this is going to do really damn well on Kickstarter. Now we can look at a game and be like, this is going to do really damn well on Kickstarter, and it doesn't. Or we can look at one and say, this isn't going to do well, and it does. And I'm not sure what that formula is. I know that there's my philosophy and my belief, and I have no numbers to back this up, but there's like 3 buckets that I think that always do well. There's the games that have existing IPs, like Zombicide, Tiny Epic, whatever, Dinosaur World, Root, Terraforming Mars, all those big games that have existing user base that when they put them on Kickstarter, they're going to do really well. I mean, look at Root. They did like $1 million in 24 hours, which I can't even believe. Like it's an expansion, and it did $1 million. Like that's crazy to me. So that's bucket 1. And then there's bucket 2. These are like like the Awaken Realms, like the Simons, like all the big companies you would traditionally think would do really well. Cephalofair, whatever Haven they come out with, it's going to do
whatever
well.
Haven.
Those are similar buckets, though, don't you think?
No, because Serious Pulp is one of those games, or one of those companies. Like they just do good. Whatever they come out with, they're going to do well at. And then I think there's like those anomalies, just those exploding kitten games, like no one sees coming.
Sure.
And does millions. And then all the rest, there's so many games out there, and there's games that people will pour money into, which they do. Like there's all these things companies have to do to make their Kickstarter stand out. And there's no exact real science to it. There's no formula to it. We know they have to put money into art. We know they have to put money into graphic design. They know the game has to be good. But even those things don't always resonate really well long term. Like I'm seeing campaigns on Kickstarter right now that look just fantastic graphically, but the audience isn't there. And I'm not quite sure why that is. Maybe it's too much stuff, just as we alluded to at the beginning of this. Maybe there's just too many games out there. Or maybe, just maybe, people are looking for specific games.
Right.
Like some games just don't resonate well with people or Kickstarter platform. I don't know what that is exactly.
I do think some of these more retail games that hit Kickstarter, and there's quite a bit to potentially unpack around this game. But this game, Bamboo Bash, came out, and we might talk a little bit more about that specifically. But if you see this game, it is very much the kind of game that sits on a Target shelf. It's a very, sort of mainstream Jenga-y sort of game, and very similar to some other games. And it doesn't have all the things built into it that typical Kickstarter backers typically are looking for, so it's not that big, robust offering that has all these extras and stretch goals and this and that. It's like a little family game, right? I don't know that the general Kickstarter traffic cares about that at all. And they canceled it that same day, probably for a variety of reasons. But one of the reasons that they mentioned were that they didn't have any of those sorts of things for Kickstarters. They were wondering, should we have stretch goals? Should we have this? And I'm not even sure if that's the answer for a product like that, because I really don't think you're going to convince the typical Kickstarter backer, the people who are looking for that second bucket you mentioned, Jeremy, the people who are looking for the next thing from Awaken Realms, or the next thing, the next CMON product, the next big Kickstarter product, or Awaken Realms on GameFound now.
Mm-hmm.
You're not going to convince them to buy what they would probably see at Target the next time they're there on Kickstarter, because they probably figure they'll be able to get it there, unless it's some incredible value or something like that, or unless everyone and their brother is talking about the product, which, is obviously something we do too, associated with this and sort of the whole machine.
Yeah, I think there's definitely those products that just are kind of outliers. I don't know if you guys have seen this, but there is a game. I don't know where I saw this, guys. It was some list somewhere, but there's a game that's going to be Kickstarted in 2021 that's played on a freaking globe. Have you guys seen this? It's a 4X game with a globe that spins. Like you're moving the damn globe around and you're putting pins in it, and it's a 4X game. Like I've never seen anything like it. But those are the kind of games that I think to myself, holy crap, this is innovative. Like this has the potential to really blow up if the game is good. But it's those weird things that are just, I don't know. I feel like those will gain the attention of people. Even like that puzzle game. You guys remember the puzzle one that I was playing a while ago?
Yeah, the magic puzzle.
Yeah. It's different. Like those kind of different things that, I don't know, just kind of capture people's imaginations.
Yeah. I mean, I think you're striking on a lot of core things when you say that. And I think the point is, like, whether the game is innovative or not, there's no guarantee that it's going to succeed at all. And, a game like that Globe game, like that is a crazy wide swing. Like that game is either going to be one of those like classic games that everyone ends up like loving as like a set piece, or it's just going to, fail and no one's ever going to hear about it again. But what's important to recognize, and like for a lot of people in the comments that are talking about, I saw Dinosaur Island mentioned. I'm seeing Terraforming Mars, Ares
cool.
Expedition mentioned. A lot of these publishers, sure, they know that the game is going to happen, right? Like it's going to happen. They're going to make the game. So they maybe already ordered production samples. They maybe already invested a lot of money into the core experience. But how popular is that game going to be? Even a game like Terraforming Mars Ares Expedition, where you could look at it and say, oh, that's surely going to be a huge hit. I don't know. Is it? I don't know. How many copies should they print? I know that Stegmaier got into some trouble with Wingspan because they didn't print enough. So using Kickstarter or crowdfunding as a metric of, number one, how many should we print? And number two, is the interest there enough that we should invest more than just a core box? Like Ares Expedition, maybe they've been toying with the idea of an expansion and they want to see how well the reception is. And if it funds on day one like it did, maybe they're kicking an expansion into production, or maybe they're expanding out their plans. I have no idea what's happening behind the scenes of any of these companies, but there is, I think, still a need to judge that. I think that if Stegmeyer had brought Wingspan to Kickstarter and seen what the need was or what the desire was for that game, we wouldn't have had all of those, stock problems that he had where people just could not get that game for the first year. And even games that are huge IPs, I know that we have on GameFound Skyrim, the board game, coming. And the first response people said to that was, well, Skyrim's so big, why would they use crowdfunding? That's a guaranteed success. But is it? I don't know. I mean, we've seen so many IP-based games that were not huge successes. Maybe the video game community doesn't want a board game. I mean, there's the possibility that people are just not interested in this stuff. And I think to say that crowdfunding isn't a useful tool is just a misjudgment. And I think Jeremy's right. We want those innovative products, but as a tool to gauge interest, there really is nothing better.
So as you say, a tool to gain interest, though, is if you pull back the curtain and you look at crowdfunding as it currently is in board gaming, is it really crowdfunding or is it a pre-order?
Well, it's both.
I mean, that's a great question.
Though? I mean, a lot of these games are pre-order. I mean, I know for a fact.
Well, that's what I mean by both.
A lot of these games are going to be produced regardless.
It's either. I'm not saying it's both at the same time necessarily, but obviously there are companies using Kickstarter and other crowdsourcing or crowdfunding as a pre-order in the absence of having their own sort of mechanism for doing so. Mm-hmm. And again, I don't even have a big problem with that. I mean, is it in the spirit of why these things came about to begin with? Probably not. It was for the small independent companies to sort of get what they need and get interest and let the people help make something happen. But I have to say, I mean, if I had a big publishing company, I would definitely be playing in the Kickstarter waters for sure. It's just there. Plus, there are certain types of products that you just, and I'm sure a lot of retailers might disagree with me on this, but there are some products that are just not typical retail products that you can't take. Imagine ether fields. You can't take a product like that and say, well, this is going to retail. Hopefully everyone wants to buy an 800-pound box full of this for however much money it is. You can't do that. What was it? Bloodstone earlier this week from Skybound. That's Kickstarter only, right? Am I right about that?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Which very controversial. Obviously, there's a lot of retailers. I saw some comments, people asking why is it that local game stores sort of are unhappy with this. I mean, I think it's on one hand quite obvious. It's literally taking sort of some of the hobby that they service out of their hands, so that they're not participating in it. I do think, though, it's important. I think a lot of retailers recognize, hey, this is the times that we live in, and have adjusted to it. I know some of our local retailers, they take advantage of a lot of those Kickstarter campaigns that have a retail pledge, so that they can kind of get involved on that front too. And Simon has done a very good job of that in the past, and I'm sure a lot of other people have as well.
I don't think that Kickstarter, that problem with Kickstarter isn't a Kickstarter problem, though.
No.
I mean, that also exists with Target exclusives or Walmart exclusives. So there's a lot of things that retailers could get upset with other than just Kickstarter than, having those games.
Yeah, that could be a whole episode.
What about, have you guys, I mean, the one thing we've always talked about, how much stuff do you guys back? Have you guys backed much this year?
I've backed probably, well, I don't know about this calendar year, but I say in the last several months, I've probably backed more than I've typically backed.
Really?
Yeah. I'm traditionally not someone who backs a lot. I just backed Block and Key. I backed something called Alba, which is this choose
that book.
Yeah, the old adventure book. Yeah,
and I will say that, I mean, as a side note, little tangent here, that type of product That is unique. I mean, it's not the globe that you're talking about, Jeremy, but it's not exactly the kind of thing that screams off of a store shelf if you were to see it in a store.
Right.
That's the kind of thing that I think has to be put in front of people on these types of platforms. And when I see them on there, for whatever reason, the way they're displayed, you're able to learn a lot about it that you wouldn't be able to learn about in a store, right? Like you see all the bits and pieces that like, oh, and it kind of explains to you what it is. And that's another interesting topic. The whole concept that on Kickstarter, it's a platform where you can not only look at a product and you obviously can't hold it in your hands, but you can get a ton of information, more than most, more than what you typically get in a store. If you ask someone, what's this game like? I mean, you can get it all right there.
Ryan, you don't have to talk about this at all. I do want to approach the whole GameFound versus Kickstarter thing.
Sure.
Because I think we are seeing a
it.
shift. We're seeing some hella big publishers joining GameFound.
Did you say
there's hella big?
big.
Hella big.
I mean, I think there's some growing dissent across the industry that Kickstarter's not changing fast enough, and GameFound's offering solutions that currently aren't on Kickstarter, and I'm seeing good games. The question is, and Ryan, again, you don't have to answer this because you have more of the back-end information.
Sure.
Do you guys think, with just GameFound being small, that's the reason why some of those campaigns aren't going to do as well? Like I look at Kingdom Rush, and the first one did like 1.2 million, and this one's about half of that with 9 days left. Do you think traditionally it could do better on Kickstarter just because it has a larger audience? And do you think GameFound could catch up? Me personally, I think GameFound could catch up just because of the titles that they have and their experience with Awaken Realms. Of course, this is Awaken Realms. It's Marston's project.
Right.
I think they have the tools to do it. Kickstarter's a beast, though. It's a big company.
I mean, I can tell you, like, obviously I believe in what GameFound does, or else I wouldn't be working for them, right? Like, I mean, that's important to me. And of course, I don't want to sound like I'm just here to promote GameFound, because I'm not. This is just my own personal opinion. So it's a tough situation to compare what Kingdom Rush is doing on GameFound right now to what Kingdom Rush did on Kickstarter, because they knew that it wasn't going to do what it did on Kickstarter, and not because of the platform, but because Kingdom Rush just delivered. And this is basically another Kingdom Rush for backers that just got a huge stack of Kingdom Rush. I saw pictures of it like almost reaching the top of their ceiling. And I think that there's, there was not the expectation. I can't say a lot, but there wasn't the expectation that it was going to do $1 million. I can say that the number that they wanted, they have reached. If I can say that without talking too much shop talk. But the idea is, of course, like GameFound's not going to have the same eyes right away that Kickstarter does, but by being specifically a game place where people come to see all just games, like we're hoping to build a community around that, and also by offering features that put the publishers first, which Kickstarter, they don't seem to have a great understanding of game publishing. And this is not me bad-mouthing Kickstarter at all, but Kickstarter has some very specific policies about the way that campaigns are run, the way that products are delivered, and things like that don't necessarily meet the needs of board game companies that might run, for example, multiple Kickstarters in a year. So again, I just think with all of these things combined, and I know Kira said she had something, maybe she could say that's not, her opinions are her own, obviously. I don't want to say anything that sounds like I'm selling GameFound, but we just have a ton of features that publishers really, really like. And stuff that publishers have been asking Kickstarter for I don't know how long I've heard people say, why can't you moderate comments on Kickstarter? Like, they've been asking Kickstarter to implement that feature forever, and they never did, but GameFound has that. And you know what? If this causes Kickstarter to look at their own processes and say, well, everyone's going to GameFound because they like this feature, maybe we should add it. That's still kind of a win for everybody, right? Like that, either we're going to compete with Kickstarter, we're going to force them to change, or people are just going to move over to GameFound and use that instead.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think that all comes down to whether or not, how much business Kickstarter ultimately starts to see shift. One other thing I want to bring, just so if for no other reason than to get away from the GameFound Kickstarter comparison.
Did we even have it?
Not really.
I
We
was
haven't even
like ready to
started it.
go, but
And oh well, we can
yeah,
come
sure.
back
Go ahead.
onto it. I wasn't expecting Ryan to actually speak
Well,
after that
I said as
question.
much as I can really feel comfortable saying about it.
But I wanted to bring up the idea of a lot of these, forget crowdsourcing for a second, or crowdfunding, and look at people who are just doing it themselves. And I think a lot of publishers would probably, I mean, in a way, GameFound almost is started that way, right? Is Awaken Realms sort of doing it themselves and also letting other people utilize it. But Stonemaier is basically taking pre-orders, and I think, Jeremy, you mentioned one of those buckets earlier, the first one, where people have just big franchises and big followings. Once you have that, if you have the wherewithal to do it yourself, there's not much reason to not consider it at the very least. Like, I don't know, like with some of those big followings, I don't know how important it is for them to rely on sort of their
Zero.
Kickstarter. I think they could just do it themselves and reach all those same people.
Well,
Maybe.
I mean, the Exploding Kittens is a good example. That trolley game that Skybound did. I don't know if Skybound need to be involved because they have an audience. Like,
Well, look at Stardew.
yeah, 20,000 copies gone in what, 2 days? And then look at Riot's game. What was that?
Mechs versus Minions.
Yeah, how many copies was that? 50,000.
Now those are huge. Those are huge properties, obviously, with a lot of following that's even outside of the board game realm. But even look at things that have established themselves. I mean, look at Gloomhaven and Frosthaven. I mean, that's clearly the kind of thing that could be just take pre-orders. I really don't know what kind of business they would lose by doing so. Anyway.
Kira, did you have something to say about the whole game?
Yeah.
No, I think you wanted to move on, so we're good.
No, I want to hear it.
No.
I want to hear the
I
dirt.
just, it feels like it's disconnected at this point, but the
No, what I mean, you deal with publishers.
well, and
like you see a side that I don't.
I mean,
at all, so
I'll start with number one. You guys talked about, and people in the comments are talking about, why Kickstarter and not retail. I mean, I'll tell you why. Because Kickstarter has built-in marketing dollars. You're paying a percentage to them in order to get your project in front of people. Retail doesn't have that, and it's much harder when there's so many games out there that aren't on Kickstarter to get your game seen in a retail store. It's worked. Wingspan is an obvious example of it, but it is much easier, especially when you're talking about a small publisher. And almost all publishers are small. Let me just make that clear. Everybody, I think people think companies are much bigger than they are. But to invest upfront in hoping you get a bet, or investing once you know that the game will sell. The fact is, if the game sells on Kickstarter, it's going to sell in retail. And there is a mix of, there's Kickstarter for retail and maybe there's not. But the fact is that a lot of these games don't belong in retail, like you said, David. So, I mean, it's just a lot harder because how much shelf space can they give to a game? Normally, when you're on Kickstarter or something like that, you're in distribution too. I feel like very few anymore can buy 2 of a game. You have to buy a case, right? And so how much shelf space in the back of the retail store can really hold it? And so, like, you look at something like Wonderland's War or Bloodstone or Kingdom Rush, and all these games that are huge, Title Blades. Like, that takes up a ton of space for them for other games, and they have to hope it's going to sell. Those games are also expensive, right? Just because they get a discount, it's an expensive game to have sitting and hoping somebody gets it. So there is a place for some things, and I do see there is, obviously. I mean, but like Jeremy said, with Amazon, with Target, all these other places where games are sold, it's just, the game's going to be where people are going to go, and that's just the way shopping works, right? But to Ryan's point, and one of the most frustrating things about Kickstarter is that tabletop has grown quite large as a segment, right? It brings a lot of, I would guess, a lot of consistent dollars to the platform for the way it works. But, from my perspective, that's not how Kickstarter was built. It's not fundamentally what they were hoping to do with the platform, what happened in tabletop. But our little segment and our little bubble has such a good marketing angle because everybody follows everybody and everybody likes games so much, and we're all a tight-knit group that when somebody backs something and it pushes that notification to your phone, sweet, I'm going there. I'm going to go see that. But what happens is it's just like being on BGG or anywhere else. Reddit, forums of any kind, there are trolls, and they come and they attack the campaign. They do like specifically try and say, I'm here to make you lose something, whatever that is, right? And Kickstarter does nothing about it. And so you can't moderate that. You can't do anything to protect yourself. It seems these days as if Kickstarter does not care about the creator at all. And GameFound does, because you can see it in how they built the platform.
Can I interrupt you with two questions from the audience? I think are pertinent. The same. Could have good opinions on. One is. I don't know the answer. It says, I'm curious. This is from Halo.
Yeah, this was good. I like this.
Companies that go both platforms for their game funding. Is that even possible? Can you do Kickstarter and GameFound at the same time?
Any examples of that?
Well,
that anyone
back
knows
in the
of?
day, people tried to do this
Not with
Indiegogo.
GameFound.
There was definitely people running dual between them, and it is something that you see in other markets that are not tabletop. It just wasn't. Indiegogo wasn't successful for tabletop.
Okay. And the other question I want to ask was from Will Tuck. He said, I'd be curious what Kickstarter thinks about this. Do they regard GameFound as a legit threat, or are they, whatever? My opinion is, hell yes, they do. If GameFound can gain CMON and maybe some other big company, it's a problem for them. Because if you look traditionally at companies like CMON compared to other companies, most of these smaller companies that do 1, 2, 3 games at a time are regulated by Kickstarter. I know this because I've heard the conversations. They'll say, while you have this Kickstarter running, you can't run another one. CMON has 7 to 9 Kickstarters that are outstanding at a time. I don't know what kind of special privileges they get, but they can run a lot of stuff on there. And if that money goes somewhere else, that's millions and millions and millions of dollars that they run a year through there. That's a problem for Kickstarter because Kickstarter is 1/3% represented from tabletop games.
Yeah.
So that's a huge portion.
Yeah. As soon as it's definitely got to be on their radar. I mean, it's not like they're definitely not. Yeah, whatever. Even just the Awakened Realm stuff alone on GameFound is probably enough for them to take notice. But the more other GameFound or others build up with other product, the more they need to, like we said earlier, potentially adjust and make it better for everyone and have more competitive platforms. I mean, that's the good news here. I mean, probably not for Kickstarter, but in general is that the more competition there is in this realm of platforms for crowdfunding, the better it is for us, the consumer, for sure, and probably even the publishers who are trying to get games published as well, because you've got these platforms kind of competing for that business as well. So that is really kind of a better position for the publishers too.
Yeah, I mean, that's what I mentioned that a little bit earlier. Like, from a publisher standpoint, and even from a backer standpoint, whether you think that GameFound is going to succeed or not, obviously I do, because I work for them. I want them to succeed. But regardless of how you feel, competition is always better for the industry. I mean, Kickstarter has not had competition in years. I mean, Indiegogo tried, but they never really. I don't know what the magic thing that Indigo didn't do was. Like, I've not really analyzed that. I know why I don't like Indiegogo, and that's because they take the money regardless of if the campaign funds or not, which I think is a little risky. But I don't know why other publishers haven't used them. Maybe the same reason, but we'll see what happens. But either way, I think publishers and backers are going to win, basically.
You're being accused of selling again, Ryan.
All right. I said, I mean, that's why I gave that disclaimer, because I don't want to feel like I'm here like a salesman,
We're just teasing. We're just teasing. Does anyone else have anything on this topic, or can we talk about some of the games we've been playing?
Well, I just want to say congrats to Ryan and your team. I mean, they made a big announcement today, and I don't want to shill GameFound. We're not getting any money from GameFound. I assure you, I'm not. Ryan is, but I'm not.
Not for being here. That's
right.
for sure.
But you guys announced what? Rainbow? Was it Rainbow? No, it was Skyrim.
Skyrim, the
Robinson
board game,
Crusoe?
Robinson Crusoe,
Which looks
Collector's
awesome.
Edition.
Yeah.
And the Gaijin, which is Awaken Realms Light's next game. The fourth game in the Hexplorit series, which is apparently widely popular. And I don't know why I've never played a Hexplorit game, but I've been watching this like new campaign build. I'm like, this is like really some really cool stuff. Apparently, there's a huge audience for Hexplorit, which I am just not tapped into. I don't know if any of our fans here are, but man, it seems like a pretty cool game system. It's like a huge adventure, kind of like Mage Knight-ish, and there's a whiteboard and you're building out your characters. Like, it's just crazy.
Are you guys working on Kingdom Death Monster and Come On to come over to you guys?
So
now Ryan's being put on the
You
spot.
chuckled, which is kind of like I can't talk about it.
I'll be honest, like anything, like, yeah, anybody like Simon coming over or Cephalofair with Frosthaven or Kingdom, like, yes, we would love to have anybody. What the conversations that are happening behind closed doors are behind closed doors. I can say that there are, beyond this lineup, there are even more games that we have not announced that are going to be pretty surprising too. So I'm just excited to see the reaction that people get. And then for those who are actually interested, there's a whole press release that GameFound released today, because later on this year we're gonna actually open it up to the public, and that's when I'm interested to see how many projects start launching, on a weekly basis. And is it going to be another thing where like GameFound becomes another Tuesday? Like, is it going to be Kickstarter on Tuesday, GameFound on Thursday? Like, I don't know what to expect.
Can I ask you a question, Ryan, before we move on to the games? When I spoke with Marcin a year ago, or even 2 years when he was talking about this idea at Essen, he had mentioned that he really wanted GameFound to feature premier games, like the games that really mean something. Yeah. And you say open it up. Do you mean that everybody could do one? Let's be honest, there are games that just don't need to be on Kickstarter.
Sure.
Are you guys going to procure those games or be like, no, it's not right for this platform?
So that is all completely Marcin's discretion, and I'm not. Whatever he's deciding on that, he hasn't shared with the employees yet. What that's going to look like. I know that you're right. That was important to him when he started. That's still important to him now. That's why he's kind of curating this list of projects that are going. But you're right. I mean, there are certain projects that don't need to be on crowdfunding. But more to the point, there has been some shady practices that have come out, and there have been some projects. I wish I could remember. Was it like Burning Sands or whatever, that game that was just a complete Massive Darkness ripoff that came out, and like that one got caught.
The one that had the copied rule book, like word for word. Yeah, I remember that.
Yes.
Burning Sands, I think it was.
Something like that. Like sure, we don't want anything like that to happen on GameFound. But what that's going to look like, that's Marcin's.
I will say.
Thing, and I'm sure as it gets closer, I'll have a more concrete answer that I can share when it gets closer to that time. But he hasn't. I mean, I don't know every detail of what he's got.
I'll tell you, as somebody who does this for a living, partially, working on Kickstarters, I'm certainly looking at GameFound, right? And thinking, is this something we should consider? Are we ready? Are we interested in moving off of Kickstarter? Because, and so I'm watching it very closely, and I'm very excited for what it's trying to do. It'll be good to see when it does it.
Yeah. Marcin had a vision for that, and Marcin's a really driven guy. He's a really smart guy. I mean, you can see what he did with Awaken Realms, and he did start GameFound to be Awaken Realms pledge manager, but they are like separate companies at this point. He just happens to be able to run both of them, and
nice problem to have.
Sure, right. But he does it because he's a smart guy and because he cares about the industry and he cares about the publishers. And like that's the thing about what he's trying to do. And I'm not saying that Kickstarter.
Oh, I think they care.
I don't know.
I just think that they have a philosophy probably behind the scenes that is not clear to all of us out here about why. Because I've always wondered, why hasn't Kickstarter decided to make special features that fit the industry that you're in, that you're on? So like if I'm a startup computer company.
They haven't had to. They've never had serious competition.
But it would be wonderful if somebody was doing that. And so now we have a board game specific crowdfunding platform. That's what happened.
Yeah. I mean, of course, we'll all be watching. I mean, and I'll be able to answer questions that people have, and as more public information gets released, I'll be able to share that as well. But I can like speculate just like anybody, but anything I do is speculation. I mean, I don't have the keys to the secrets either.
All right.
Okay,
What are we
Ryan. Okay,
playing?
that's enough. That's enough. We'll all be watching, but what have we been playing? Who wants to start? Who's been playing anything?
I played a lot. I played a lot this weekend. I think I announced some of it on Discord. I played Lost Ruins of Arnak, which we've already played. I like the game. Like, there's a lot to like about that game, and I mentioned that on Discord. I think it's super innovative. Like, there's a lot of things in that game that are just fun as a deck builder. However, I also feel like as it currently stands, it could be samey after 3 or 4 plays. Even with the backside of the board, I just feel like a lot of the strategies are going to feel the same. Regardless, it's a great game. Also played over my shoulder here, Overboss. I backed that because David and I had a Kickstarter. What was it called? Kickstarter what?
Killing it on Kickstarter.
Yeah, so we had a show a long time ago, maybe a year and a half ago.
3 episodes.
Yeah, we didn't do a whole lot of them. And that was one of the games we talked about. And it just appealed to me. Like, I'm not a big boss monster fan. I'm actually not a fan at all about that game. But this one looked compelling. And I got to say, it's pretty fun. Like, there's a lot of cool things in this one as well. But the one game that I played that I really enjoyed, actually 2 more games. I played Cryo, which I'm not sure you can see up here.
That's out already, or did you get an advanced copy?
Hold on for 1 second.
Advanced.
All right, it's an advanced copy from Z-Man. This is from Tom Jolly and Luke Mori.
Yeah.
It's a worker placement game. It's got a lot of the similar things that you would find from all of Luke's games, where you're either taking a worker out or you're, bringing him back. However, it's a very, very simple game. Like, if you played Energy Empire, if you played Dwellings, if you played Whistle Mountain, this is by far the simplest of all of them. It's very entry. It's very beautiful. Like, the artwork in the game is fantastic.
Yeah, it's got a great art style.
I feel like I need to play it. I just played this with Kira, and I feel like I need to play this 3 or 4 player. And the reason is the ideas behind this is that you've crash landed on this planet, and on this planet you have to dig into the surface because it's a frozen planet, and your crew is broken up into different ships, and you have to find these caverns, and in these caverns you have to populate them with the people that you've saved. So it's basically Kira or I controlling that. There's no third party that's going to control those areas. So with that area control or that area majority that you're fighting for, it's just her or I. When a 3 or 4 player game, that's when I think those things really start to come into play, especially the worker placement spots, which are really cool too. There's spots in each side of the spots. You occupy it and you take one of those actions on the sides. But if someone goes here, they block them, so someone on the other side can't take some of those other actions. So you really have to pay attention to where you go. And again, with more players, it's just more blocking. And the last game I played was... What was the last game I played? Oh, Minecraft, yeah. I was pleasantly surprised. I walked around Essen and saw that game 2 years ago.
Biomes one?
Yeah.
Is this the one where you like drop the cubes out?
There's a
tower?
big cube. There's a big cube block, right?
Oh, that's what it is.
It's ugly as sin. Looks like Minecraft. Everything's blocky, but it's surprisingly fun. Like, I was super surprised by it. It is ugly, right? I mean, it's ugly.
Like, what? You want to play a Minecraft game? And then I was like, that was super fun. Can we play it again?
Yeah, Minecraft puzzle was that puzzle book for Minecraft was.
The puzzle
great.
book is even better than
that
game. Anyway, those are the 4 games. I probably played more in that amount of time. I mean, I'm more than halfway through Cantaloupe right now. Nice. Of course, I played Quicksilver, just because he came out. But there's a lot of games, little games I play. I don't really need to mention, although I just mentioned them. So I'm done.
All right, David.
I've been
Ryan,
I'll go because I've been playing quite a bit, of course, lately. I just recently have been back in my Euros. We played Praga the other night, and just reminded me how much I like that game. But I'm also 10 Dreams now into Etherfields, which is quite a bit of time sunk into it, but still
right?
not. I don't think even remotely close to the end. There are things that I really, really, really love about it, like how the narrative is coming together over these 10 dreams, and how we're starting to kind of piece some things together, and how we are getting better as characters. not just as characters, but we're getting to become smarter players, and we're working together better. We're able to solve some of these puzzles better. But there's just some tedium to the game. Like, for those who haven't played Etherfields, every time you finish a dream, you have to reset, you go back to the world map, then you have to move around the world map, you have to collect these keys, there's random encounters. It's a lot like a video game in that there's random encounters, and then you finally get to your destination, and then you get to go back to the other dream. So we're on our 10th dream now. Just finished our 10th dream, which means we've run around that world map 10 times, and the random monsters that you encounter, there's not a lot of variety in them. So 10 times through, we've fought the same couple monsters 3 or 4 times now. And yeah, there are ways to like banish a monster out of existence so you never have to play it again. And we've done that with one of the monsters. But like it just feels like I almost wish there was a fast forward where I could just skip to the next dream. Some of the stuff that happens on the world map is very cool, but the dreams are where the innovation and the actual gameplay really comes into focus. Jeremy, I know you guys have played it. I don't know how many you've played.
No, I
or
agree.
If you feel that way.
Everything you said is absolutely right, and I think that's the problem that a lot of the reviewers have. I didn't watch the Shut Up and Sit Down, but didn't they pan the game? They didn't like it at all.
No, they mostly panned the rule book.
Oh yeah, the rule book's not fantastic.
Well, I mean, there is a lot of tedious in the game, but you're right. The dreams are the fun part. And we just started getting to the area where you can start calling out some of those slumber cards, and that's where the game starts to pick up too, because it does get repetitive. Those slumbers you see over and over and over. You have to fight some random monster for 5-10 minutes, and then you're on to the next one. If those were taken out, and they do get taken out, the game speeds up a little bit. But yeah, that's the one downer in the game. Still, I think the experience overall is really fun.
But yeah, I mean the experience is great, and those dreams, like with it being such an ethereal concept, I mean there's so many, like you go to a dream and it's just something completely different. No real spoilers, but we had one that we were on a boat in a sea of mud, and like the whole dream was about like running the boat. Somebody had to steer, somebody had to pull in the sails. And I was like, this is like what a weird mechanic, like what a weird scenario we're in. But every scenario has felt super weird, and I like that. I think it's a great game. So we've been playing a lot of Etherfields. My Dice Stone stuff came in, so I've been playing a lot of Dice Stone and teaching it to all my friends. And I recently played through the solo mode of the West Kingdom Tome Saga, which is a series that goes through all 3. You play Architects, Paladins, then Viscounts with some added stuff. And that was a lot of fun. I played that solo just because it's difficult here to see other people. So that's basically what I've been playing.
Kira, what about you? Other than what you played with Jeremy?
Well, he did fail to mention we got to play So You've Been Eaten, which I've been very excited about for quite some time, and it was such a weird and neat experience. You really weren't sure what was happening at first, and I was like, this doesn't. Oh, wait, whoa, what is happening? Suddenly, I'm worried, and it doesn't seem like it's going to go my way or your way. And it was a very close game in the end. We'll talk more about it because I know we're covering it for the Kickstarter.
Well, also, I want to jump in real quick about that, because that's one of those games that we've all played these where you play the first 10 minutes of it, you're like, this is way too simple. Like, we're not going to like this. But the game rapidly builds up. And once it hits a crescendo, you're like, you see the genius behind the game. Like, there's a lot of things in that game that you don't even see the first 20 minutes you play it. And you're slowly building it, and you're like, oh, I understand now why they're playing that card there, and why you need to build this and do this. It's a very simple game at heart, but it's really, really, it's got a lot of cool parts in it. I liked it. I liked it for what it was. I was surprised by it. And you said very early at the beginning of the game, Kira, I remember your statement. You said very specifically, there's no way in hell I'm going to win this game. There's no way. You're going to kill me. And she won. Just because of the way the game is designed. It's meant to feel certain ways at certain times.
And so, speaking of Scott Alms, who designed that game, so obviously part of the reason I wanted to check it out in the first place. And it's a weird game. Like, the theme is super weird. You are an employee of this company, and you have to go get these gems, and these gems only grow in the bellies of these beasts, and you have to get the gems out before you get eaten by the bacteria. You've already been eaten, but the bacteria will actually kill you. So you got to get in and you got to get out. And it's just a very weird dynamic, and it makes me think of like, what does that welcome to working for us video look like, right? I imagine some goofy, like old, so you've been eaten, kind of video at the beginning of your training. Anyway, totally funny, and I love it. And obviously, Ludicreations is the perfect company to make such a weird themed game. But speaking of Scott, Tiny Epic Dungeons. So both of these are Kickstarter games. Tiny Epic Dungeons, so it's on point. Just launched this week. Obviously, I'm a huge Tiny Epic fan. And I wasn't sure what I was going to think about a dungeon crawl when I've got Dice Zone Adventures sitting over here, and I really love Dice Zone Adventures. Will I like them both? Will they both hit the table type of thing? And absolutely. Like, I know it's still early and the rule book definitely needed some work, but like, it was a lot of fun to play, and I mostly played it solo. And I have yet to beat I've yet to even get to the boss. Like, no matter who I play it with, I have yet to get to the boss, and that's really crazy because I wouldn't have expected that out of this game at all. But it's its own unique dungeon crawl. It is definitely a Tiny Epic dungeon crawl of its own. You can see a lot of familiar things from other things that you've probably played, but it's got that nice Tiny Epic resource management and how your hero works, and it does have dice rolling, but it has the mitigation just like you would hope for, and it's done really, really well. It was a lot of fun to play.
Do you think they'll ever say this is our last Tiny Epic game?
I wouldn't.
No.
Are you kidding?
Why would they?
Do you think Ticket to Ride will ever
Kickstarter.
stop making versions of Ticket to Ride? Right?
But again, that kind of goes back to our whole
expansions to it.
When you look again, I want to go back to that Kickstarter thing and real briefly, like, why would they? If you have an IP that you can, I don't want to say milk in the bad way, as if they're just churning out stuff. They're not. There's obviously thought behind this and the next terraforming and the next dinosaur world and all those kind of things. But if you have a solid IP, why not make more games of it? Like, it doesn't make sense.
And the thing is, each of those games, while there might be nuancy little things that you recognize from another one, they don't do that through all of them, other than maybe the art, right? I think, but even that being said, a lot of them have a different vibe to the art, and so they do a really good job of each game being its own game, unless it's meant, like with Tiny Epic Kingdoms and then Tiny Epic Defenders, those were part of the same world. So it made sense that you felt the same in both of those to a degree, one being a co-op and one not. Yeah. But when you go through all the different Tiny Epic games, they're very different types of games. Tiny Epic Mechs is a programming game, right? Dinos is a worker placement game. We've got the Western, we've got all these different ones. They all operate very differently. And so Scott does a really good job designing these. I mean, another game that I have that I need to play that I just got opened is Warp's Edge, another Scott game, and it's a solo-only game, which I never would have thought I would have been getting into solo as much as I have been in the last couple of months, a lot later than everybody else. But I mean, he makes designs that I really enjoy. I don't care if it's Tiny Epic, I don't care if it's somebody else. Like, he makes games I really enjoy. So I'm always going to check out his games. And if they're on Kickstarter, that's great. If they're not, I'm still going to get them, though. So somehow I will hunt them down.
I've been playing a lot of our upcoming preview titles. One that I played in particular, I won't spend too much time, but Alicia and I were over at her parents recently, and her brother was in town, so it was kind of a family event. And we were in charge of bringing some games to play. And we just recently gotten a copy of Long Shot, the dice game, which is this horse racing game that's coming out. We're going to be covering. I think it's coming out, going to hit their campaigns in the next month or so. This is a horse racing roll and write game. So if you're familiar with Long Shot, which I was not, it's similar in its DNA, but this has got a roll and write mechanic, and it's actually quite a bit of fun. If you've also ever played Downforce, which I hadn't, you'll also be familiar with sort of the concept where there's all these things racing, in this case horses, not cars, but You might own some horses, but that's not really necessarily the only way you can make money. You're going to be placing bets. You're going to be crossing things off at a concession stand in order to unlock bonuses. Maybe you get more money to bet. It's got some really interesting things. It's very simple. It plays up to 8 players, which is one of the reasons why I identified it as something we could play. This also made me go, you know what? I should probably experience Downforce. And I've had a copy of Downforce for years and never once played it. So I pulled it out of the closet and we played Long Shot in the afternoon and we played Downforce at night. This was actually a week ago because I needed to test them out before we unleashed them on her family. And then we ended up playing both of those games at her parents'. And in fact, Downforce, we played a couple times. We played one side of the track and then the other side of the track. It was a really good family experience. Her family got very accessible games, and they all got very much into the whole sort of betting mechanic. You know, it's really fun. I actually think the Long Shot's a little bit more of a gamery game because of the roll and write mechanics, and you're able to do a lot and have a lot more agency about what's going on in the game than in Downforce. But Downforce has a little bit more of that sort of like take that and being a jerk on your turn by playing a card and moving the cards in such a way that it screws everybody from moving forward. And some of them liked that a little bit more. But both games were a lot of fun. I had never experienced either or anything like that. So I'm going to be doing a preview for Long Shot here in the next month. Other than that, we played some old standards. We played Skull.
Nice.
We always have fun with Skull.
Mm-hmm.
We just have fun with it. It's a silly, kind of stupidish game, but it was fun. And we played a lot of Just One. In fact, we played so much Just One that my original markers, like most of them now, are out of ink. So
My family loves that game too.
yeah, it was a blast. We had a lot of fun with that. I had one, and everyone chose the exact same clue out of the 5 people at the table. So I had no clues to guess my word. But anyway, that's what I've been playing.
Awesome.
Is there any, before we go, is there any one game you guys are anticipating? Like, do you really want to try out, you've heard about recently, and you're just like, oh, I got to play this? What?
I can tell you this. I haven't been this excited about a new game in a long time, but I played the prologue and the first scenario for Vampire the Masquerade Chapters.
Oh, yeah.
And I did a video for it, and I came away from that just like absolutely like immersed in the experience. And I played through the prologue in the first chapter and then was immediately like, I want to play the next chapter. Like, something about the way that game presents itself, like a choose your own adventure style set in the world of Vampire the Masquerade, just grabbed me instantly. And I really, really liked, like, it just puts you into the driver's seat of your character and forces you to make decisions. And there literally is a choose your own adventure book that comes along with it based on the decisions you make for the scenario. It changes the way the scenario ends, and it changes the path that the whole story takes. And what they've talked to me about when I met with the designers, if everything that they've said like comes to fruition the way they've said it does, I think that this is going to end up being like a very memorable narrative experience. And so I just cannot wait for this to come out. It won't come out until later this year, but I think it's still available for late pledging. So yeah,
I was trying to wrap this up with
excited.
something fun, Ryan, and Ryan has a 5-minute comment.
No kidding.
I'm just saying, you asked.
You don't have to say why. Just like one game that you're like, oh, you know, this looks cool. I want to play it.
Okay, well, I get excited about it. Watch my video. I love it.
There you go. I just say, watch the video. No, all right.
I mean, other than things that I've already talked about and things that I'm working on, which I'm excited about, but I'm not going to go Ryan route on it. But no.
David?
I got nothing. I'm looking forward to playing No Man's Sky a little bit more.
Oh yeah.
Beat Saber.
Cool.
Yeah, Beat Saber is always
excited for more Beat Saber music. That's what I'm anticipating.
Cool. I'm interested in Stardew. I bought the game, so I want to try that one out. And then Red Rising. I'm not a huge fan of all the Stegmaier games, but this one looks cool. I watched a couple videos. Looks like a cool game. Anyway, that is Chit Chat episode 80. Make a comment today, and you can win Meeple Land from Blue Orange Game. And check us out in what, David? 2 weeks?
Probably 2 weeks.
Probably.
Hopefully 2 weeks.
Probably. We'll find out. All right, guys. Thanks.
Bye. Bye-bye.